Hey everybody, Keith Dotson here, and in this video, we'll be taking a brief glimpse into the life of an ordinary American family from over 100 years ago. This is an envelope from a photo processor that's full of old negatives from over 100 years ago. I found these negatives in an antique shop recently and was very interested to learn about the family shown in them. But first, let's talk about the envelope itself to see what we can learn. We can see from the envelope that these negatives were submitted on 5/22, which I'm assuming means May 22nd, with no year specified. The cost of film processing and prints totaled 39 cents. Far cry from today, isn't it? The customer name on the envelope was listed as Williams, with separate lines listing Brown and Winona. The notes on the envelope call for developing of one roll of 1/16 film with 6 exposures. But Monroe Studio was more than just a Kodak photo finisher. They were also a portrait studio well known in Tulsa at the time. Monroe Studio was in business from 1915 until 1980. At the time our negatives were processed, Monroe Studio was located at 231 East 3rd Street in Tulsa, although they were in many locations over the decades. Let's jump over to Google Street View to see if the studio is still there. It looks like there's just a parking lot at this address now. Monroe Studio was somewhat unusual for its time because it was started by a female photographer named Olive or Ollie Monroe in Tulsa in 1915, after she had already operated photo studios in Kansas since the 1890s. According to one article that I read, Ollie Monroe had left Tulsa for California by 1920, and the envelope states that the studio was operated by a C.A. Burritt successor. To learn more about the history of Monroe Studio in Tulsa, I reached out to Luyckx Williams, Archivist and Curator of Collections at the Tulsa Historical Society and Museum. His best educated estimation, based on the envelope design and the business address, placed these negatives to about 1919 or 1920. In May of 1919, photographer Chester Allen, or Chet Burritt, became the owner of the business by obtaining a mortgage for $3,000 to Ollie Monroe for photography, office furniture, and fixtures. Okay, with no further delay, let's take a look at these. The negatives are larger than 35mm film, and they're a different aspect ratio than modern medium format film. I researched 1/16 film, and the negatives were 2.5 by 4.5 inches, giving the photographer 6 frames per roll of film. According to this website, 1/16 film was introduced in 1899 and discontinued in 1984. Our first negative shows an unidentified mother and child kneeling in the grass. And here's the positive image. Could this be Mrs. Williams? I love that we can see the shadow of the photographer. Our next negative shows a man in possibly 1920s fashion holding a baby flanked by 2 women. I think it's the same baby from the first photo, with mom partially visible on the left. Look how short his necktie was. Here we see visitors preparing to depart. The adults watch the baby toy with luggage while they stood around talking. Have you ever experienced this moment, the sad feeling that people you care about but don't really see often enough are about to leave, probably before you're ready to see them go? The woman with a hat appears to be wearing some kind of trousers. Surprising to me considering what I understand about the mores of the era. But our next negative is from a different time of year. They're wearing coats. This negative shows a woman holding a baby and a young girl in winter coat standing by a flower trellis. I like her hat. The little girl is pointing or gesturing. I wonder what she was saying. And our final negative is larger than the others, a whopping 3.25 by 5.5 inches. This would have been from a roll of 1/22 format film, also called postcard format, which was introduced in the early 1900s and discontinued in 1971. It shows 9 jovial people in period clothes gathered around a tree, with a few people actually perched in the branches of the tree. They seem to be having a really great time together, and their clothes are really stylish. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing these vintage film negatives of faces from the past. Thanks for watching. To see my own black and white photographs, visit my website at keithdotson.com.